everyone, and welcome to Flip the Script Season 1, Episode 2, Shallow Objections, and how to counter them in a way that wins you the meeting. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we get going on the content here, I want you to stop what you're doing, go to flipthescript.co, and be sure to download the deck so that you can follow along with me while I'm going through the content. Once you've done that, let's jump into the stuff. So first, why don't we start with an example of what shallow objections are? So there's two types of objections from my perspective. There's the deep objections that have a lot of details that are really meaty, and then there are the shallow objections, which is basically someone giving you an excuse for something that's not the real objection. So think about it like when you're a little kid. You ask your mom, like, hey mom, what time is dinner? But the real question that you're asking is, can I have a snack before dinner? So you're trained from a very early age to ask questions that aren't the real questions and to give excuses that aren't the real reason of why you're not doing something. So kind of think through the mechanics of when you're walking down the street. Imagine that you're with your friend and you're walking down the street and you're going out to eat or something. And someone walks up to you cold that you don't know, and they have like a neon vest on, and they hand you a clipboard and they say, will you sign this? And you find yourself coming up with a litany of reasons, or at least I'll put myself into the shoes. I start coming up with a lot of reasons that aren't the real reason of why I'm not stopping. I'll say like, oh, I don't have any time, or I pretend like I'm on the phone with someone, or I walk around them and basically just say like, no, I don't have any money, or I don't know what it is that you want, but I'm not interested. So the real reality in that situation is I don't know who that person is. I don't know what organization they work for. I don't know what cause they work for. I don't know what they want. And I don't know if I necessarily want to be a part of it. But I know that in that moment, I'm just not interested because I want to go do my thing. So I'm going to throw out a myriad of different objections that are just shallow objections or shell objections for the real reason. And the real reason is I just want to go do my thing, but I don't want to feel like a bad person. So I start offering up all these different excuses, to basically get the outcome that I want, that I basically just want to walk away. Your prospects are no different, sorry to say. So whenever you think through, and I've asked this to multiple sales teams whenever I'm training them, there is a razor thin line between an objection that is real and an objection that is shallow. And so I would say about 90% of the time, especially with these objections, your prospects are just saying them to you to get you to go away because they don't know who you are, they don't know what you want, and they don't want to spend the time to figure out who you are or what you want and if that fits into their logic set of what they're willing to offer. So they'll give you a bunch of objections, but there's about 90% of them that are the shallow objection, and then about 10% of the time, they're very real. And you have to be, smart enough to discern which one is which. Right? So the difference typically is when you go into an investigative crime scene and you basically have two people who might be a potential prospect for who's guilty, they will separate the two people and they will ask them a lot of questions. Question after question after question. What they were wearing, what they were doing, where they were at, why they were doing that, what it smelled like in the air, how much money did they have on them, who did they talk to that day. Because their reasoning in that is that somewhere, if they're guilty, they'll mess up in terms of details. They'll cross wires, they will have a conflicting story to some other person, and it basically will come out in the details, of that they are the actual person that's guilty. So that's why you get the slogan, the devil's in the details, right? So the difference between a real objection and a fake objection or shallow objection is typically going to be in the amount of the temperament of your prospect and the tone in their voice and the amount of detail that they're willing to give you. So for instance, before we go into this counter, someone saying they have no time and someone saying, actually, this isn't the right time. We do have an objective for this in Q3. We have an RFP that's coming out at that time and I would love to get you involved. Why don't I email you on October 13th? And we can get something going then. Both are the objection of no time, but one objection has a lot more detail, and so I'm convinced that there is actually a reality. The danger in trying to counter a real objection is if someone tells you the real story and says like, no, this is actually October 13th, stay tuned until then, and then you push again as a sales rep, typically the person will be turned off. So let me tell you a story before I go into the shallow objection counter. I once was on the phone with a sales leader. An SDR of mine had set an appointment with a very high net prospect, and there was a sales leader who took the meeting because it was a really great prospect. Sales leader jumps on the phone, or I'm sorry, the prospect jumps on the phone and they say, hey, I just wanted to jump on the phone to say good job to this SDR and their prospecting ability. We actually have an RFP out for this initiative, and it's not going to be until November 1. So I will keep you posted until then. The sales leader counters and says like, oh, well, don't you want to know what we do? And he said, November 1. And then he said, well, why don't I just give you the details of what we do? And he said, let me be very clear here. I'll never forget this. He goes, let me be very clear here. We have an RFP out on November 1. The difference on whether you're involved with that process or not, or whether I never talk to you again, is if you let me off the phone right now. He didn't want to know at that point in time all the different competitive differentiators and feature set of our product. All he wanted to do was give him the real objection that it wasn't until November that we should be involved. And when we tried to counter that objection by trying to give him information, the prospect started to get mad because he was telling the truth. So how do you know which one's different? How do you know which one's real and which one's shallow? And how do you counter the ones that are shallow to bust through and get the meeting? So there's going to be, these are the 4 shallow objections that I was going to start with. And I'm going to give you a 4-step process and unpack that in a second. But here's a couple of examples of very, very common objections on the phone that you're going to get. So let's start from the top. Not interested. I'm running into a meeting. I was in a meeting and I took this call because I thought you were somebody else. Those 2 are probably my favorite shallow objections. And then send me an email. So typically how these are countered is, the prospect says, send me an email, and the rep will say, okay, I'll send you an email. Or sometimes they're trained to say, what should I include in that email? The problem with this counter is if that's a shallow objection and they say, send me an email, what they're really saying is, no, but I don't want to feel like a bad person. So go ahead and shoot me an email, and then I'll ignore the email and waste some of your time. So we need a way to shatter through that objection, but again, give us a caveat out if it is a real objection so that we don't turn the prospect off. So these are all essentially the same communication of like, I don't want to take the time to figure out whether you have something that's really valuable to me. So I just want to get off the phone, but I don't want to feel like a bad person. So how you can counter all 4 of those objections and any shallow objection and uncover if it's real in the process without making your prospect feel bad is the following process. The first step is to start with a pattern interrupt. A pattern interrupt is any statement that basically busts outside of the bounds of what a normal conversation should do. So there are rules to every conversation, really, or there are typical rules. So if I say, hi, my name's Becc, what's your name? You would typically say, my name's blank. How are you? Or nice to meet you. If I say, how are you? You say, I'm good, thank you. How are you? If I say thank you, you say, you're welcome. So there are normal rules to every single conversation that we have that fits in, with our typical society. A pattern interrupt is any kind of different piece in that conversation that takes it outside of the bounds of a normal conversation. So for instance, when your prospect says, hey, thanks so much for calling, Becc. Actually, can you just send me an email about this information? I'll follow up if I'm interested. I need a way to bust out of this buyer-seller mentality of like, they're the buyer and I'm the seller. They're saying, send me an email because they're expecting me to say, what do you want in that email? But essentially, they're expecting in about 10 seconds that I will leave them alone. So instead of saying any of that, I say, they say, hey, Becc, can you send me an email? I say, can I level with you? I've been hearing send me an email from a lot of people recently. So I want to start by saying, I've been hearing this a lot, so you're not in the wrong here and you're not uncommon. And it's different because I haven't asked them any information of what they like to include. I've been hearing send me an email from a lot of people recently. Step 2 is you want to call out what we call the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is your best guess as to what they're actually communicating to you whenever they say that thing to you. So when they're saying, send me an email, typically, I'll give you a quick tip or a quick insight. They're typically saying, go away. I don't want to talk to you and I want to get off the phone with you. So I have the temerity and the audacity to say that to them. I'd say, hey, can I level with you? I've been hearing send me an email from a lot of people recently, and I'm getting the feeling that that's your polite way of saying, just go away, you annoying sales rep. Did I get that right? So you basically, at this point, you want to say, read between the lines, think about what they're actually communicating to you, and then communicate it back to that person on the spot and say, is this the right thing? Did I get this right? Is this what you're actually communicating to me? At this point, you'll hear one of two reactions from your prospects typically. If it was a real objection, meaning they really were running into a meeting or it really wasn't the right time, they will back themselves up at that point and they'll say, no, I actually am running into a meeting right now, but I am interested. So call me back at this point in time, or no, I actually am really interested in this product or whatever, but we don't have a project until Q3, et cetera. And they'll give you the level of detail. So this is a good place that you will surface out who is actually telling you a real objection, because typically they'll start to back it up with details and they'll say, no, you're actually wrong. This is not what I'm communicating to you. But by and large, the majority of the time, I would say about 75% of the time in my experience, they'll start breaking down laughing. They'll say, yeah, you did get that right. Like, you caught me. Or they'll start cracking up because it's different than something that they've ever heard. And you actually are nailing it on the head of what they're communicating to you. So when they start doing that, step number 3 is I go into empathy. I say, I get it. I say the same thing whenever people cold call me out of the blue. So I completely understand. So you want to empathize with them, that you understand of why they're doing what they're doing and they're not a bad person, and that switch the seat, you would have done the same thing. So again, it's going to go, hey, can I level with you? I've been hearing send me an email from a lot of people recently, and I'm getting the feeling that that's just your polite way of saying, go away, you annoying sales rep. Did I get that right? And they'll say, yeah, you actually did. You caught me in the act. I would say, don't worry, I get it. I do the same thing all the time. I did it to someone who walked up to me the other day. How about this? And you want to deploy on them what's called a prospect pact. So what is a prospect pact? A prospect pact is a pact between you and your prospective buyer about what is going to happen in the next coming seconds to get buy-in between you and that person, so that you have some level of agreement on the steps that are going to ensue. So there are 4 pieces to a prospect pact. The first piece of a prospect pact is going to be commitment. So you're going to say, this is an example of a prospect pact, but you can do all kinds of different, you can switch it up on technique or for whatever different language style you like, or if you want to switch out terms, but the structure is the following. You give me the next 20 seconds. So that's the commitment upon your prospect that you're asking for, is step number 1 of a prospect pact. Step number 2 is going to be the agenda of what is going to happen within that 20 seconds. So here I put the example of, to give you my best dog and pony show on who Okta is and why I thought we might be a good fit for you and your team. Stress the word might. You want to give them the impression that you're not sure if they're a fit for you and you're not sure if you're a fit for them, because you don't want to be pushy sales rep. The third step to a prospect pact is you want to state the typical outcome. So you want to say at the end of that 20 seconds, you tell me whether it makes sense to continue the conversation from there. So you basically are giving them some kind of barter. In step 1, you're asking for something. Step 2, you're outlining the details of what that ask is. In step 3, you're telling them what you're going to give them back. So think of like when you were a little kid and you said, hey mom, I want to go over to Cindy's house, on Friday night, or Linda's house on Friday night. If you let me go over to Linda's house, I will do my laundry for a month. Or I will clean my room, and my brother's room for 2 weeks. So you basically were bartering with your mom in that situation of like, hey, if you give me this thing, I will give you this thing in return. If you, let me go over to Linda's house, I will do my laundry. If you give me the next 20 seconds to give me my best dog and pony show, I promise you won't hear from me again, if we miss the mark. So you essentially want to do the same thing with your prospect, where you're telling them, if you just give me this shot to talk to you for the next 20 seconds, and this is what we're going to talk about, at the end of that thing, if it doesn't work out, it's more of a barter, then I will never call unannounced again if it doesn't hit home. So usually at this part of the cycle, I'll see about a 90 to 95% conversion. I very, very, very rarely hear someone say no. This is one of the strongest pieces of, talking with the prospect, because most people want to give a salesperson, the shot, especially if they're well researched, especially if it's within bounds. So I'd shoot for 20 seconds and I'd say, how about this? You give me the next 20 seconds to give you my best dog and pony show on who Okta is and why I thought we might be a good fit for you and your team over at Oracle. And at the end of that 20 seconds, you can tell me whether it makes sense to continue the conversation from there. Is that a deal? So the fourth piece is that you want to ask for consent. So again, commitment, agenda, outcome, consent are the 4 pieces to a prospect pack. So from the top, your prospect gives you a shallow objection like, hey, Becc, so, good to hear from you. I'm actually running into a meeting. Can you just send me an email? And I say, hey, Mark, can I level with you for a second? I've been hearing send me an email a lot recently, and I get the feeling that's just your polite way of saying, go away, you annoying sales rep. Did I get that right? And he'll say, yeah, I actually did. I'd say, I get it. No problem. I actually did that to someone who walked up to me with a clipboard earlier today. How about this? You give me the next 20 seconds to give you my best dog and pony show on who Okta is and why I thought we might be a good fit for you and your team over at Oracle. And at the end of that 20 seconds, you can tell me whether it makes sense to continue the conversation from there. Is that a deal? So your prospect at that point typically will say like, okay, I'm going to give this person 20 seconds, or worst case scenario, the objection was real, and they'll tell you the real reason, and then you can plan a follow-up accordingly. So that's everything. Thanks so much everyone for coming. If you like today's session, be sure to go to flipthescript.co, log in, and you can see a lot of different sales topics where I have some content and associated decks there that you can download as well. Or if you really like the content, be sure to go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn and give us a follow. Hope you have a great day.
Watch out.